This is Dave, aka the Guru, and another tutorial using Game Salad. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do an escalating scoreboard. So what we're going to do is, here, let me just show you the preview of what I've already got set up. And so I'm doing this for my pinball game that I'm going to be entering in the Game Jam. And so I want to have the top 8 scores always listed in this format. So what I'm going to do is I've got it set up right now so that when the last ball is lost in the pinball, it'll go ahead and look at the score and it'll determine which place it needs to put it in of these 8 places based on what score it's higher than. So let me show you. So we've got some random scores put in here in a table. And I'm going to go ahead and hit input here. And I'm just going to input this really high 500,000 score here. And I'm going to go ahead, and this is going to go ahead and zero out the ball count because the ball count's at 3 right now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit 0. And so you're going to see it put that in the first place because it's a high, very high score. So now let's go ahead and what it did, it pushed all these other scores down. Okay, so now let's go ahead and so we keep, everything moves down in its rank based on its number. So let's go ahead and put this ball count, when I hit this little reset, I put the ball count back to 3 so I can trigger these rules again. And let's go ahead and hit the input, and let's go ahead and put in a 500 score. Oh, we already have a 500. Let's make it 550. Let's input that into the score variable, and then let's go ahead and zero it out. And so you're going to see over here it put the 550 in its proper place, moved the 500 down the 400, and it moved that 300 score right off of the system. And so if I let's go ahead and make a 3500 here. So let's go ahead and reset the ball count, and let's go ahead and make this 3500 and done. And let's go ahead and zero it out. And so you see it put the 3500 in its 3rd spot, 4th, and then moved everything down and got rid of this last score. So let's go ahead and look at and see how we do this. So let me go ahead and open this actor here that was where my score information is, and I'm just going to go ahead and click off the code, and I'm going to show you how we build it. So let me just show you a couple of things real quickly that I'm going to be working with, and this can be whatever you're using. I'm going to set this to 0. This is the score, and so this is my ball count, and that determines when the game ends. When you don't have any more balls for the pinball, that means the game over when this is 0. Each ball takes away 1. And I have my score variable here that tracks the score when you hit all the different pinball things. So now let's go ahead into, let's go ahead into our high score here, and let's go into my little manager actor where I handle all that information. So before we do that, let's go ahead and look. I made a score table. And I have a basic table here, and you see I just inserted some values in here for testing purposes. And I wanted 8 different high scores to be displayed in their order. And so we'll always be putting the the score will always be highest to lowest from 1 through 8 in our table. Okay? So now let's go ahead and so let's make a rule, and we'll call this high score. Okay, and so we know we want the high score information to trigger when we don't have any balls left. So let's go ahead and we'll go to that attribute, and we'll say when that attribute game dot ball count equals 0. So when we're out of balls, we want this code to start to execute and determine the place for where that particular score that we've earned in this last game belongs. So now what we're going to do is let's come on over and let's grab a rule, and I'm just going to make this rule outside of the other rules, and you'll see why in a minute, but we're going to put it in this rule. So we'll call this score, and we'll call this, we'll just call this score 1. This will be the first of the high scores. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say when our attribute game.score is greater than, and we're going to go and reference our table, and we know that the highest score we want is in row 1, column 1. So we'll go ahead and grab a table cell value. We're going to look to that piece of data to see what it says. And we will go with our game, and my table is my score table. And we know that we're looking in row 1, column 1 for the highest of high scores. Okay? And so now what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to go ahead, and what we're going to do is we're going to grab a add and remove table row. And so we'll select our table, and we're going to say we're going to add row at the beginning. So we want to add that row at the beginning. So we want to make that one. So what we're going to do in our table is, and let's go ahead and look at the table real quick again. So basically what we're going to do is we have 1 through 8 rows. And so what we're going to do is, if the high score is the highest of all scores, we're going to go ahead and add a row above row 1. So basically what will happen is when we add a new row in here, it's going to push all these other rows down 1 numerical value. So this new row that we make will now become row 1, and that's where we'll store our new high score. So let's go ahead and do that. So we can do this one at the beginning. And then what we're going to do is we need to go ahead and now change that value, because it'll be 0 because it's a new row. It won't have any data in it. So we'll grab our change table value, and we'll go ahead and grab our game score table. And then we know it's going to be row 1, the new one. It's in column 1, and we want to put the current score in there. So we'll go ahead and say game dot score in that new value. And then what I usually like to do when I'm saving, I like to let things make sure they run through. So I just throw a timer in there, and I say after 0.3 seconds, which is a really couple code cycles, I hit run to completion to make sure that that gets saved. And because this will no longer be greater than, right? So if I go ahead and let's just walk through the logic here. So if I got my game.score and I put it into this, okay, and I'm using a greater than, and I'm going to add the row, then I'm going to go, and so when I add the row, this condition will still be valid because now this is 0, okay? So this score will still be higher than the row 1 value. And then we're going to go ahead to add the row. Now that's going to make it 0 from the other number. And then we're going to go ahead in this, and we're going to add our score. So what happens is when we add that value in here, this now becomes equal to. So now game.score is the same as what we've put in that table now that we've executed putting that value in there. So conditionally what's going to happen is this rule will actually stop firing and cutting off because it's equal to and it's no longer greater than. So that's why we're going to use a timer with run to completion checked, so that we can make sure this fires off even after all this condition changes. And so we'll go ahead and grab our save table, and we will grab our scores table to save our table. So now the reason why I made this rule outside of it is because what we're going to do is we're going to actually copy this, and you'll see why. Because what we're going to do is we're going to do nested conditional statements in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and use the otherwise section here of our rule, our first rule. And so let's go ahead and just copy this in here. And so now we'll come down and we're going to name this score place 2. This will be the second highest score. And we'll just come down. We know that's going to be, we'll be storing that in row 2. And so now what we need to do is we need to change this from at the beginning to at index. And what at index means is we're going to add a row at a particular row. So we want to add this before row 2, since now we're looking at row 2. So if this score is higher than row 2's score, we're going to go ahead and say add a row above row 2. So we're going to say at 2, add a row. So now this new row that we're adding is going to become place number 2. It's going to become row number 2, and what was row number 2 is going to get pushed down to row number 3. So we'll go ahead and we'll say we know that's going to be row 2 that we're writing to now, and everything's the same, and our saving is the same. So now in these otherwise conditional statements, what's happens is, because if we left these rules outside themselves, so we say if game.score is greater than row 2, row 3, or 4, if we just left these rules by themselves, basically a highest score would now overwrite every single place in the table, because a high score is always going to be higher than everything below it. We don't want that to happen that way. So what we're saying is how the code's going to fire is, let's say that it's not higher than the highest score, but it is higher than the second score. So what's going to happen is the code's going to come down, it's going to scan it, it's going to say, is score higher than score 1? Is it greater than? No, it's not. Well, if it's not, then otherwise, then if you're not this, now come to this one. So it's going to come down to this one in the otherwise section, and it's going to say, okay, yes, I am higher than game score 2, and it's going to execute, and it's going to stop here. Because what we're going to do is we're going to keep chaining these in the otherwise sections of the rules. So we're going to come down, and we're going to go ahead and grab this next one, because otherwise will never be executed once it meets a condition of the rule itself. So even though down here the score that we're looking at for score 2 is higher than score 3, but it's never going to execute this piece of code. It's never going to get to here because it's in the otherwise section. And since this one does match, okay, it won't go ahead and execute to the next one, because it only hits the otherwise section when it doesn't meet this condition. So it's going to stop right here because this will be greater than 2. So it'll go ahead and fire it and do it, and it'll never go into this next otherwise section unless the score happens to be not higher than 2. So if we start up here at 1 and we say that the score is higher than the third place, so we say, yeah, no, I'm not higher than the score in the row 1. Nope, I'm not higher than the score in the row 2. So that means I got to go to the next otherwise section, which, yes, I am this one, execute this code, and stop. And so we're just going to keep doing this process. So now in this one, we're going to do it at index. So in this one, we're going to be at row 3. So this is going to be score 3. And we'll go ahead and change this to row 3. And then, of course, row 3 is what we want to be writing to now, and our index is going to be row 3. And all that is the same, and then we'll come down and we will go ahead and add this in here. And this is now going to be 4. And so we will come down and we will grab this and we'll change this to row 4, because that's the score we want to look at, what's in 4. And we're going to add at index, and we're going to say at 4, add a row above it, and then we're going to say 4 here, and the save table. And then we're going to come down. I have 8 spaces, so we've got 4 more to go. And we're going to go ahead and drag this in here, and we'll change this to 5. And we will go ahead and change this to, we want to look at the value that's in row 5. And then we're going to go ahead and do our index, at index, and that's going to be 5. And then our row is going to be 5 that we're writing to. And we're going to go ahead and open the otherwise section of that rule. And we're going to go ahead, and this is going to be 6. And we're going to go ahead and change this to row 6. And we're also going to do our index at 6. And then this is row 6. Okay, so we've got that. And let's go ahead down. And we will open up this otherwise section. And we will go ahead and grab this. And this is now going to be 7. And we're going to change this to 7. And at index 7. And this is row 7 as well. And so one more. And we're going to come down and we're going to go ahead and grab this last piece. And this is going to be row 8. And so we'll open this up, change this to 8. And at index row 8. And this is row 8. And so you can do this with as many places as you want. I'm just doing it to 8. And you just keep going in the same pattern. So now we've got all our stuff set up here. That, let's see if I just change this one, yep, to 2. So we have all our score, so it's going to, when it's 0, it's going to start scanning through and find the one that it's higher than. It'll execute that code, push all the rows down in the table, and basically what it'll do is we'll end up with, when we pass 8, we're going to end up with 9 rows. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to use this rule here, and I'm going to say, delete unused rows. That way we don't have our table filling up with just all these rows we're pushing down. So we're going to go ahead and say we're going to go ahead and actually change to a numeric expression because we need our table cell value on. We actually need to grab the table row count. So we're going to go ahead and grab the table row count. And this is going to count how many rows are in our table. And we're going to go ahead and say, pick our table. So our scores table. And this will give us how many rows. And so we're going to say when you equal 9, let's get rid of this. So when you have 9 rows, and let's get rid of this other stuff that we will need to save the table. So we're going to go ahead and when you equal 9, what we're going to do is we're going to say remove row and remove the row at the end. So when this pushes out to 9, so when we replace the other scores and we push all the way down to now we're adding rows. Every time we add a row, we're going to have 9 rows. So every time we have 9 rows, which we don't need, we only need 8, we're going to go ahead and just get rid of that row so that we just don't keep filling the table with more and more and more rows as we add them in the places that we need to add them. This will delete the last row, save the table. It'll give us to 8 rows, and we will be all set with that. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just so I don't save my tables at the same time, I'm just going to make this like a 0.5 seconds, give a little difference in between when I'm saving the tables. That way things don't get make sure things don't get messed up when they're close together. We want to make sure our code fires in some kind of order where we're not going to have any conflicts. So now we've got it all set up. And basically in here, I've basically done what I've done is I've got one box and I basically use the offsetting system, and basically I'm just displaying the text for each row 1 through 8, so that it'll automatically change as we add the row and the new one becomes 1. The new scores will come in there and filter through all the way, and it will continually update our scoreboard and put everything in order. That way we can keep intact all our different stages of high scores that we've accomplished in a game. And that's pretty much it to making a score chart that can insert scores where they belong without losing all the other data in overwriting things and keep our progressive high scores in there and have them put in the proper place. So anyways, this is Dave, the Guru. You can find me under the name Lost Oasis Games on the forums. I'll see you in the next video.